Classroom. This is a great opportunity. If you haven't had a chance to minimize Nicole's screen, what you should see up at the top is the green, you're viewing a screen, and then there should be view options. If you click on that, it should give you a list, and one of those is exit full screen.
Perfect. But we're off to a great start because we're already opening up windows and interacting. So this is great. Okay. All right. So you have joined us today for Zoom tips and tricks. And my name is Nicole Carter. I'm a part of the digital curriculum crew. Background: before I became a TOSA, I worked in 8th grade language arts for 12 years and did all things digital as much as I could to help with my efficiency actually in the classroom, because I had huge amounts of a caseload. I had 180 kids plus every year. So the more technology I used, I actually found that I was able to grade things faster and give more feedback, etc. So it just led me down this wild path of using technology all the time. Kristen, introduce yourself.
Kristen McCartney. I'm a digital curriculum TOSA. Spent 11 years as a middle school science teacher and then 5 years as middle school elective teacher. And lots of my family are also educators. So thanks for joining us today.
There we go. Okay, so I wanted to really quickly go over some Zoom settings. I'm just going to share my Zoom settings screen. Again, remember we're recording. So as I'm going through this, if you can follow along with me in another tab, fine. If not, you can watch this back. We'll put it up on YouTube. A great feature in YouTube is utilizing the little cog in the corner and slowing the playback speed. Don't know if you knew how to do that. I tend to go the opposite way. I like to hear things in 2 times speed. I like people to go fast, but you can slow me down. If I'm going too fast, you can slow me down. You can rewind me and watch it as many times as you need to as we go through these pieces. But I find that I have more access to things when I go to zoom.us on the web instead of using the client that I might have downloaded to my teacher laptop. And so I'm going to be showing you that instead of going through maybe the dark black screen that you might see when you open up Zoom on your computer. So I just go to zoom.us and I log in using my Beaverton email. And hopefully this is nice and big enough for you. But I'm just going to go through a couple of things. And I wanted to show you also a quick trick that I found to be very, very helpful, especially with Zoom settings, because the Zoom settings are huge and long. I don't know if you've ever taken the time to go through the settings and to know too that Zoom is constantly changing. So if something worked for you yesterday and then you're finding it didn't work for you today, odds are it's probably not your fault or your issue. Zoom is rapidly changing. Keep in mind, Zoom was created for business meetings. It was never made for education. And so we're asking it to do a whole bunch of things that it just quite frankly wasn't made to do. Zoom on their end knows that education is a huge part of their current money-making scheme right now, and they're trying to adapt as much as possible. So things are constantly changing. Kristen and I are hearing from IT all the time on how things are changing. So getting to know the settings in Zoom, I think, will be really helpful for you. So you're going to go to zoom.us, you're going to sign into your account, and then you're going to, over here on the side, it defaults and opens to your profile. So I'm just going down here to where it says settings. And most of the time, the settings that are the biggest issues in classrooms actually are kind of midway down underneath setting basics. So it starts with security, and then it also goes into like scheduling meetings. But most of the stuff that's really important and critical in classroom is in this meeting basics section. So I just have to scroll down a little bit to get to that. So a couple of things you need to turn on if you're going to be hosting any breakout rooms on your own, or hosting any rooms in general, maybe not even breakout rooms, but you're going to be hosting things. You do need to come down into this meeting basics section and turn a few things on. As a classroom teacher, you need to think about, do I want kids to have access to the chat? If you do, then you need to turn it on. or if you don't want it on, you're going to toggle this little switch off. If I was a classroom teacher, I probably would make sure to turn off this private chat feature, but maybe you might want that on. A private chat just literally means, you know, I see Dorothy's name, so I'm gonna pick on Dorothy. Dorothy has a specific question. She can private message me as the host and ask me that question. And so I have it toggled on because I want my people that are in my trainings to be able to do that. But as a classroom teacher, maybe that's not something you want them to have. Another option is these sound effects. As a person that leads large trainings, I need to know, and I did actually turn off my waiting room. I guess I should say that too. I don't even use the waiting room in Zoom. When you all were waiting for today's session to begin, you saw a waiting room, but all that was a slide deck, the first slide in my slide deck that I was sharing, because I like to not make anyone wait, and I like to share music. I love to teach with music. That's been something I've always done. And so as you joined my room today, you probably heard some music in the background, and then you saw that waiting room slide. But that is not the waiting room that is set up through Zoom. That's me just making that happen. Part of my whole protocol when I'm using Zoom is that I get all of my materials set up and ready to go, and I close out all of my other windows. As you may have experienced this year, there's a lot of factors that come into play when it comes to your video screen experience, your sound, etc., that is pulling from your internet. So if you're at home and you don't have a very good internet service, a lot of that will kind of, you know, affect how your students are experiencing your Zoom room. So keep that in mind. And so my music thing, that's something that I just always do. And I have the waiting room turned off in my Zoom settings. But then I also like to know when people are joining us and when they're leaving. And so when it says play sound for, myself and Kristen are the host and co-hosts of this session. So I'm actually hearing, I actually hear every single time someone enters our room as a doorbell, and then I hear as someone leaves, like someone just left actually just now, and I can hear that in my background. You as the audience member doesn't hear that because I have turned it off, that it's only Kristen and I that can hear it. Additionally, I have turned on polling. So if you're interested in using polling features, you have to actually go into your settings and turn that on. I have turned on screen sharing for everyone. That's another feature you need to think about. It might be something with little ones that you have to build up to. Even at secondary, you might have to build up to it. You know, what is appropriate for screen share and when do you do it? And what are the protocols for me when you're going to share your screen? Most of the time when we're providing like digital support, I need to see your screen to know what you're doing. And so I have to have that turned on. So that's a personal preference that you have the ability to do. I do have annotation turned on, but know that your students with Chromebooks cannot annotate. Their Chromebooks do not support it. So you might be able to annotate over the screen, but they cannot. Another one that's really important for you to turn on is the nonverbal feedback.
And Nicole, will you pause for a minute? We're getting a couple of requests for just a little bit slower as people are navigating with you.
Okay. So the nonverbal feedback, I'm going to kind of go over in a little bit, but it is another way for you to engage your audience members and the meeting reactions. So in the beginning, when I was trying to deal with my crazy dog and I asked you guys to find the reactions and give me a thumbs up if you too have an animal, that was a meeting reaction, and I have that turned on. Nonverbal feedback happens with the participation window. And again, we'll kind of go over that in a little bit, but that also should probably be turned on. The allow participants to rename themselves. I think this is a really powerful and important feature, especially if you're going to be creating breakout rooms. But again, it's something where we have to have conversations with students, digital citizenship. What is the expectation? I have this turned on so that you can number yourself 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. I have this turned on so you can name yourself with your table group. But if you're going to abuse the privilege and name yourself Stud Muffin 22 or something, then this is where I can go and like turn that off. But I think it's an important tool for teachers for sure. But again, digital citizenship is needed. Okay, and then breakout rooms. If you're going to be creating breakout rooms, you're going to have to toggle that on as well, and that's in the meeting advanced options. And those, I think, are the most important ones. And one thing to cheat, and this might be an advanced feature, but I found it to be incredibly helpful. On your keyboard, if you hit the Command F button, you'll notice on my screen, I hit Command F, and now I have this ability to type something in. So if I type in nonverbal feedback or nonverbal, it highlights it for me and moves my screen exactly where it needs to go. So with Zoom settings, because I'm providing so much support for people, we have so many questions about what's happening with Zoom. I go here all the time, and I use that Command F feature to try and find specific places, just again, because it's so large. There's so many settings in here that we could kind of change and do. Okay. So again, we have an entire slide deck all on Zoom settings. I've added that in the Q&A doc, Kristen, but I'll also put it here in the chat. So again, I need to move on, just keeping in mind with our time, but remember that we're recording. Did I hit record? Yes, we're recording. So we'll have this available for you. You can go back and rewatch me. You can slow me down, rewind as many times as you need to. And then we also have a slide deck too that shows you individually what things to turn on and turn off. And that is in the chat for you right now. All right. Okay, so we're going to go through a couple of different things as we are kind of moving around. Keep in mind some of the things, and I'll try and make sure to tell you this is a host feature, and so it's going to look different on your end. But one thing I want you to try and do for me really quickly, you're going to go back to the screen where you can see all of our faces, the Brady Bunch gallery scene. And up at the top, let's go ahead and play around with the view itself. So right now I'm on speaker, or what is it? I'm on gallery view. Can I have everyone go ahead and try and turn on speaker view? And it is in the upper right-hand side of your Zoom screen. And if you can't see the gallery, then you might need to minimize my share screen. So you might have this window open, and you might need to minimize it by hitting the green button, so that instead of being full screen, it's a smaller screen. And find that gallery view. Okay, then I want you to go ahead and find your picture and click on the 3 dots, the 3 jelly beans. And why don't you rename yourself? Keep your first name, and then on the last part, can you go ahead and tell me what school you're at? Okay, we're gonna start also, again, I'm still kind of hoping that you are seeing beyond my share screen. You also kind of are in the gallery view so that you can actually see the buttons and controls, because we're gonna kind of move through each of them. I think, as I was kind of saying in our last session, utilizing some props here would be awesome. Reminding students when to turn their mics on and off. We found oftentimes that people start talking to us and they're muted. And so, like, for instance, I have this little prompt that I use all the time. You're on mute. Hey friend, you're on mute, right? So utilizing little things like this, and maybe for little ones, maybe instead of words, you could have the image itself. And I've seen on social media that there's a lot of people that have those images ready to go for you to print out, but I just made this, right? It's just a popsicle stick with words on it. So utilizing props can sometimes be helpful, but in the bottom right-hand corner, you've got your mute, your unmute. When you are a host, you have the opportunity to also, right next to that, click on the security button and change things in the middle of a meeting. So for instance, when we very first opened today's meeting, someone, whether they meant to or not, started to annotate all over the screen. And so I went into security and turned off the annotate on shared content. So you can click where it says, where you see on the screen right now, where it says allow participants to share screen, and it has a little checkbox next to it. That is actually something that I can turn on and off. So when the checkbox check is next to it, it means it's turned on. When it's checked off or the check mark isn't there, that means it's turned off. So you have the ability to mute students. Unfortunately, I think we don't have the ability to send everyone into, that was a question that people kept on having, can we send all students into the waiting room and then bring them all back? We can't do that, so it's an individual click. And then there isn't a way to turn off video cameras as one. Right, Kristen? Remind me if I'm right or wrong. So that is an individual turn on and turn off. If you have a student that's saying that their sound is not working properly, one thing to remind them is, you know, unless you need them to have their videos on, if they turn their videos off, then the sound might get a little bit better for them. So making sure you teach those controls, I think, to students is going to be really helpful. As a host, you can go in and individually turn people on and off. So sometimes when we're in a bigger setting like this, I can start to see who has been muted and who is not muted. And sometimes we hear like crashes and things in the background, and it's really easy for us to see really quickly who is making those sounds and to be able to mute them right away. But that is largely helpful when you have the participants window on. You can also do those things when you hover over individual faces in your gallery view. And one thing too, and I don't know if it shows this in the settings, Kristen, do you know where it shows how they turn on the 49 views?
I'm gonna check that right now, but it's been delightful.
I know, so
that feature, so I'll check.
Let me, I'm gonna do a new share and show my main screen really quickly. In the actual thing that you download to your laptop. So I clicked on the settings and I'm underneath general, I go to video, and then I turn on or checkbox display up to 49 participants. So once you turn that on or check that, you should be able to see everyone's face, which I know that's been something that everybody has been saying that they wish that that was better. Now, granted, your faces are kind of small on my laptop. If you have a larger monitor, then obviously the faces become a little bit bigger. But in order to see up to 49 faces, you have to go in and turn that on. Okay, continuing on. If you've gone and clicked that participation screen, like I asked you guys to in the beginning, go ahead and click both participate and chat. And I'm gonna have you go ahead and click on the go slower button. See if you can find that. And now what happens on my end, as you guys are putting that, giving me those reactions, I can actually see how many of you have found it. So at this point, we have 67 people that have joined us, but only 25 of you have hit the go slower button. So as a way to do some formative assessments and to engage students in things, you can use these are the nonverbal participation feedback features. I showed you how to turn that on in your Zoom settings earlier and said we'd come back to it. And so this is just a way, I'm gonna have you click on the more button and find the coffee cup. Now, as the host, I can now see you've clicked the coffee cup and you no longer are showing as a go slower option. So as the host, it tells me how many of you have clicked a certain thing. And depending on the last button clicked, that's what it's registering for me. So I actually have a little bit of feedback or data on that piece. So I'm gonna have you again, knowing the difference between the reactions versus the nonverbal feedback, can you find the reactions for me down at the bottom of your screen and give me a thumbs up? Great. Good job, Lisa, Donna, thank you, Sharon, Melanie, awesome. So again, just a little way for you to communicate with your students and have them use some different features beyond just in the chat, give me a yes, right? So I would interchange using the renaming feature, using the reaction feature, using the chat box. Did I say that already? Chat, reactions, and nonverbal participation. I would go back and forth between those when I'm working with students. Okay, so that's kind of what I was showing you before. So I get this tally or mark that shows me who's found it and given me a reaction. And in your settings, you have to actually just turn on the nonverbal and meeting reactions, which I showed you earlier. Okay, you also have the option to like pop out your chat box screen or to minimize it once you have it open. And sometimes that's helpful, especially if you're only using a small laptop, to be able to move the chat window around so you can see when everybody's talking to you. Additionally, when you're the host, you can turn things on and off, both in security, but then also when you click those 3 buttons in the bottom corner. For you right now, it might just say save chat, but when you are the host, you have quite a few other options. So right now I have it turned on, for example, where everyone can talk to each other publicly in the chat as well as privately message me and the co-host. But I can change that at any time. So if I see a student that's abusing the privilege, I can turn the chat on and off. So having your chat window open is obviously really important, especially if you've turned the chat feature on for people. And I did, Kristen, fix the poll so we can use your Zoom feature. Everybody was really excited about the polling feature, and I'm just gonna say this yet again. We got so many emails as we were in pre-service for people saying, how do I get polling? How do I get polling? I'm just not that excited about the polling feature in Zoom, just simply because I know we have other tools that we can use that are much, much better. But we'll go ahead and go through the polling feature for you, and then you can kind of make your own decision at that point. You can create polls ahead of time, or you can do it on the fly while the meeting is going. Just know that it's a little bit clunky. It will open up a window in a browser for you to actually enter the information. And then you launch it as the host. So I will go ahead and launch this Thor poll. And you'll see that Kristen made this meme of, on a scale of 1 to Thor, how are you feeling today? So feel free to go ahead and just participate. On my end, I'm seeing how long I've launched that poll. And then I have the option to end the poll once I see that everyone's entered. It tells me that right now about 20 of you have entered or answered the polling question. Again, this poll is something I set up ahead of time. I went into my Zoom meeting scheduling and added the poll there instead of doing it live right now while we're all sitting here. All right, I've got 50 of you that have answered. So I'm going to be closing the poll in about 5 seconds. So we're missing about 10 of you from answering. So again, it's all in how you use all of the data that it gives you. So now I'm sharing the poll for you. So you should be able to see our top answer was number 7. And then I'm going to stop sharing that poll. So something to keep in mind with the polls is that it's a multiple choice question only, and you have up to 10 options at any one time. So, you know, again, as I talked about before, you have the chat, you have the reaction buttons, you have nonverbal, and then you also could potentially use a poll as kind of formative assessments and engagement strategies with students. But again, you're limited a little bit with your poll and how many different questions you do. Okay, so in terms of your share screen option, something we've talked a lot about when it comes to recording lessons, I'm bringing this up because what we found is in order to keep students off of the recordings and the screen, you have to share your screen and you have to spotlight your face, your video, in order to make sure that in the recording, all of the other students or the gallery view, or if you do some sort of call and response, that the students, when they respond, don't also show up in the recording. So practicing a little bit with the share screen option is really helpful. And then I also kind of want to preface, because I said the word practice, Kristen and I have learned so much about Zoom by doing 2 things. 1, we launch random meetings where no one else is in there, it's just us, and we start pressing buttons, right? Because you as the host have access to different things than you do when you're an attendee like you are right now. So anytime I'm like, no, wait, how did that work again? I launch a random Zoom. I don't even care. I just say join Zoom or start a new Zoom, and I'm in there putzing around. So that's the first thing we do. The second thing we do is, where possible, we get another individual or 2 or 3, and a group of us will go in and start pressing buttons. That is incredibly helpful when you're wanting to practice or play around with breakout rooms. Otherwise, everything else you can practically try out if you're in a room by yourself. Sometimes if it's like a Saturday and I'm like, I don't want to bug my team, I will pull out like my phone or an iPad or something, a secondary device, and join the room with another device, just so that I have one other person in there, so I can try things out. So I can't tell you enough. Don't be afraid to launch a Zoom room and just start poking some buttons. You're not going to break anything, okay? But I can't tell you enough that that's how Kristen and I learn, and we're constantly learning new things all the time. And so give yourself some grace, and when you get frustrated, launch a Zoom room and poke some buttons. Okay, so when you share your screen, I've said this already, but one of the things that I always do is I will close out all of my other tabs. I normally have like 50 tabs going at any one time. And when I'm about to do a Zoom, I know that Zoom takes so much from my computer and from my internet that I'm trying to give Zoom as much opportunities to not fail as possible. Does that make sense? So I close everything else out. And I only have the windows open of the stuff that I need. I try to close out my mail. I try to close out like anything that might ding or give a sound or confuse students. I close all of that out, and I only have the windows open that I need. That helps on a couple of different levels, but for the most part, I pre-create that. And I also will use multiple different windows. That's hard when you only have the one laptop. And I will preface this and say that Kristen and I both use 2 devices when we're doing sessions like we are right now. And that's really helpful. So I usually have the gallery view on my laptop, because that is where my camera is. And it reminds me to make eye contact with my audience. But most of the time, all my content is actually over here on my other monitor. So if at any time you're noticing me turn like this and look over here, it's because I do have a secondary monitor where I have a couple of windows open with the other information that I might be sharing with you. And so I'm kind of trying to navigate that a little bit better, but that's one of my tips, is that I have my window open. And so when I go to share screen, I always have a couple of different options. In this case, I always pick a window with the slide deck that I'm about to share. And then I also always click on buttons. And do we have that up? Okay, here we go. I'm going to go to this. I always click these buttons down here in the corner that say share computer sound and optimize video clips. I just turn those on automatically every single time, because I don't ever want audio or a video for my audience to be interrupted. So I just always turn those on. And that's when you hit that share button, okay? And just like I talked about before, I always like to use music. So sharing computer sound, I had a teacher ask me the other day, if you're sharing computer sound, can a student still hear you if you are talking? And the answer is yes, unless you mute yourself. So you can have a playlist going and then mute yourself. Students will still hear your playlist, but they won't hear you talking or taking a bio break or whatever else you might be doing. I highly recommend utilizing music or having some backup playlists or, a YouTube video in the background. That should be a part of your toolkit. If something breaks or something's not working on Zoom that you don't know how, share your screen, play a quick YouTube video while you Google search how to fix the problem that popped up. You know what I'm saying? So practice that. Share your videos, share the video, optimize that video, click that box open, and have that kind of up. That might be something I just constantly have up, an ABC song or whatever, depending on what level you are helping with. Have a backup so that when your technology breaks, you have something else to share while you're trying to fix it in the background. And I think that that would be really helpful. Okay. Kristen, anything I need to share? Okay. If you have access to a secondary device, it could be your phone. If you have access to an iPad, awesome. All you need is a lightning charging cord. You can plug this into your iPad or to your phone and then plug it into your teacher laptop. And then it becomes another device. If you need to annotate or write or do like a doc cam kind of situation, you can do that straight on an iPad. And when you do the share screen, when you do the share screen option, you just then select, let's see. So right now you're seeing when I hit the share button, what I was trying to show you was that my share window will pop up and I will have the option to share iPhone or iPad via cable. And it's that easy. You'd click that and then it would share your phone or your iPad. And that can be helpful for a couple of reasons. If you wanted to, again, do like a document camera, I would much rather write on a piece of paper or on an iPad with a stylus than try to use my trackpad and do like annotation on the screen with a trackpad. That can be really, really difficult. And so that, I think if you have access to a device like that, kudos to you, but then all you need is your cable. And that would be a nice and easy way. And I would recommend doing it cable instead of this other option you see here on the screen that says AirPlay, because again, that could mess with like the view from the audience, if that makes sense. So if you can use the cable, that's what I would use.
So Nicole, just to reiterate, right, I'm going to take my normal cord that I would use for my iPad or my phone, right? Yep. So normal one, normally this has got like the brick that goes into whatever charging piece, and I got to put it close to my, and this is what goes into my, my phone. Yep. And then so this part goes into the computer. Yep. Right. If I've got a USB little port, and then this part goes into my phone, and then I have the option to connect with the cord. Yeah. So you can use like the camera on your phone to like look at a piece of paper that you might be handwriting on. You could use an app where you take a picture of something and then write over the top of it using like a whiteboard app or something. If you were reading like an article from Newsella or CNN or something, you could write over the top of it using an app on either your phone or your iPad. So it can be really, really helpful. And if you do have another device like that, like I said before, you can join with a secondary device into Zoom. And that could even be a place for you to help like monitor if you're running more than one breakout room. You could have one device in a breakout room while you're in the main room. So another device can sometimes be helpful if you have access to it. If not, you know, there's other ways to do certain things, but if you do have access, we just wanted to make sure we shared it. Oh, look, we do have it in the slide deck. That's what I was trying to show you this whole time. So that's how you'd use it. Okay. I referenced the spotlight video again earlier. So this is just when you're recording your lessons, in order to make sure that students are not seen on the screen, your workflow, your order of operations, your steps you would go through would be to click on your image, hit spotlight, and then you would share your screen and then hit record. And it only really works if you share your screen. Otherwise, your spotlighted video might be the large screen that the students are always going to see. But then when you're recording, Zoom will still record the gallery view. But if you're sharing the screen, the share screen will be the largest piece that it's recording, and then your video will be tiny up in the top right. And that's just going to, again, make sure that students' faces don't show up in the recording. Not that there's a problem with that. Legal has said it's okay. But if your building is worried about that, that's how you kind of get around Zoom not recording children's faces. Okay. So it changes
every day. We've tried to provide some protocols for what to do when you're recording in Zoom. When you are doing a one-to-one session, we do want you to record that. If you are working in elementary, then we have this on the slide deck, you have access to this. We have a one-pager for elementary that talks about how to go about, recording from Zoom. And then how you might share that if you have to share it back with students, if you're sharing to Seesaw or if you're sharing to Canvas. And then if you are in secondary, then we have a different one-pager that shows you how to do basically the same process, but then we've removed the Seesaw portions because secondary doesn't use Seesaw. If you are recording a long video, the longer the video, the longer it takes for it to upload back to YouTube. So keep that in mind. If there's ways to do or record only your direct instruction, that's really, other than if you're in a one-to-one session, which many of you probably are, that's probably some of the things that you are doing. So the one-to-one sessions, just record, you don't have to worry about it. The one-to-one sessions can actually record to the cloud. So when you hit record, instead of hitting record to this computer, you hit record to the cloud. That's your one-to-ones. Anything else, you can record to your computer, but then you'd have to upload to your YouTube station channel. And I would keep those to just the direct instruction and try to keep those to 10 to 15 minutes. Again, the longer it is, the longer it takes to upload to YouTube. Any other thoughts on that, Kristen?
Nope, that sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, and then breakout rooms. So what we've been hearing, especially at elementary, is the use of breakout rooms in a couple of different capacities. So breakout rooms, I've heard at elementary only really, where they're sending students individually to their own breakout room. Just to get them out of the main room and not distracted by their peers and working on an activity, and then the teacher can pull them back into the main room when they're ready. As a co-host, you do not have any control or capabilities with breakout rooms. I'll phrase that again. As a co-host, you do not have any abilities to manipulate and manage breakout rooms. So if you're in with the teacher and they are the host, you still have to rely on them to do all breakout room management. There's no way around that. So if you are working with a teacher that wants you to create breakout rooms, then you will have to be either made host, which you can swap hosting back and forth. So right now I'm the host and Kristen is the co-host. So if I needed to leave and I wanted her to manage some breakout rooms, I would have to switch the host over to her. Okay. Or you just need to have a conversation with your teachers and say, well, then I need to manage a separate Zoom room where I'm the host in that instance. So I don't know how deep we need to go into breakout rooms. In our last session, we actually went ahead and just manually assigned everyone into a breakout room so that you could just experience it. Maybe give me an actual reaction, thumbs up if you'd like to go into a breakout room and go through that process. Waiting for an actual reaction. Some people do want to. Sometimes it's fun when you have never done it. Okay, we'll do that real quick. So when you're doing breakout rooms, as the host, you have to click on the breakout room option and you have to then assign them. So I'm going to really quickly create some breakout rooms. I'm going to do 9 breakout rooms. I'm going to select automatically assign, and then I'm going to hit the create breakout rooms button. As I do that, then I now see all of these breakout rooms have been created, but I still need to hit open all rooms. Once I hit open all rooms, you will see a tiny little screen pop up that says join a breakout room. I'm only going to send you in there, and then I'm probably going to call you back. The way Kristen and I did this in the last one is I did broadcast a quick little message because I want you guys to see what that looks like, and then I'll probably call you back. Okay, so I'm going to open all rooms. You now should see a little button on your screen to join. Go ahead and join.
1 minute, 37 seconds later.
Right. Okay. So from the teacher's host perspective, from the breakout room host perspective, I then have to open the rooms back up again in order for that button to show up at the bottom. So it's not like the window will announce itself again. It's just the button shows up down there at the bottom. So your direct instruction to the students at that point would be, and again, once they're created, they remain that way. It's almost like you've created them as table groups or something. So it's like, that's the best way I think to give it an analogy like that. So you've created table groups. Those table groups maintain themselves the entirety of the Zoom session. And so as long as you keep opening those breakout rooms, they'll go back to the same table group, AKA breakout room, every single time. You can change those up and make a new table group by hitting, you can see on my share screen where it says recreate. If you hit the recreate button, then that's like you jumble everything back up and they are now in new table groups. But otherwise, if you want to keep them with the same group and keep them working together again and again and again, you just say open rooms and they will then go into them. You can, instead of automatically, you can manually put them together. So if you have groupings that are specific to something, their reading level, for example, you can manually put them into, you know, the rooms that you want them to be in, and then you can join specific rooms from there. Kristen, what was the thing you were asking about when everyone was in the breakout rooms? Because I've totally forgotten.
Scheduling or creating a meeting.
Oh, right. Okay. All right. So in zoom.us, I actually use this more than I use, again, the black version on my laptop. I don't know, what's the word to call that, Kristen? The application, the software on my laptop. I actually use zoom.us on the web more than I use scheduling and features on the application on my laptop. So I go to zoom.us. I would then either go here to schedule a meeting, or I would go over to the left-hand side where it says meetings. It's going to show me what's coming. And then I've got this button to schedule a meeting. So once I hit schedule a meeting, I might say test meeting, whatever my title is. I'm going to pick my date. Maybe this is for tomorrow. And it's tomorrow at 1 p.m. Right here where it says reoccurring meeting. So let's say you have a group of 4 students that you meet every Thursday at 1 p.m. What you would do is you'd hit recurring. And actually, I think that it's helpful to just go ahead and say no fixed time. And once I say no fixed time, that just means it's a meeting that is created. It's not attached to any one date, so it doesn't expire. But like maybe I say Thursday group A, Carter. Like maybe it's Mrs. Carter's group A reading group, whatever. So I've said recurring meeting, no fixed time. That is the Zoom link that I would then give to that particular group of 4 students that I meet every Thursday at 1 o'clock. I would then maybe change this so that it's more student friendly. Maybe I just would type read instead of, and maybe I don't want it uppercase. Maybe it's just read. That would be really helpful for young ones, I think. I always default to having my video off when I start a meeting, because who knows what I'm doing when I click launch, right? So I just always turn that off. And then at this point, you know, you do, for the most part, we do want students that are in the BSD system joining. This is something for security reasons why we're trying to avoid, you know, Zoom bombing and people coming into meetings that shouldn't be there. So once you click that only authenticated users can join, you have these options down below. So if we did BSD only, then that means that only the kids that are signing in with their BSD48.org accounts will get in. It's like appropriate students, right? And then down here, if you have someone's email, and you need to make them an alternative host, like a teacher you might be working with or something, this is where you would add them in. I have this handy dandy extension where I can just really quickly copy Kristen's email and I paste it in and I say save. So now that I've created this meeting, if I click on here where it says copy invitation, usually I just grab this section and that's what I share in my email or something to someone that I want them to join that meeting.
I have a question about when it says you wanted to generate your meeting number or use your personal, which ones are we supposed to use?
I would not ever use your personal, especially not with students. A personal meeting ID is something that maybe you use, randomly. Like I said, when we're practicing, when I randomly need to practice and say, how does that go in Zoom again? And I open a random meeting. Anytime you open a random meeting, that does default and use your personal meeting ID. But I think whenever you're meeting with students, I would not use your personal meeting ID. You're going to just create a random Zoom URL. If you use your personal meeting ID, it's attached to your Zoom account. And Kristen, I don't know if you can say anything more to that from a security standpoint, why we don't do that. It's just,
I've been hearing different suggestions from different buildings. So that's where I hesitate. But my personal philosophy is the same as Nicole's. I would rather just generate a new one that's not attached to my personal Zoom room.
Okay, because I see people reuse the same one over and over and it's always the same number and everything, so I never knew.
Well, I mean, in this instance, we created a recurring meeting. And so when I share this is the same account or the same meeting ID and the same password, however many times I want to use it. Because it's recurring and because it doesn't have a fixed date, I can use this over and over and over again. It's just not my personal ID.
So it doesn't expire even after 2 or 3 months?
Yeah. And then I wanted to go so far as to say too, to make it easier on myself, like for today's meeting, I didn't do it on this one. It's not funny, Kristen. Okay, so earlier today's meeting, I will always create it in my Outlook. And then in the description for the meeting, I include that Zoom link and password, that information I just showed you that I normally copy. And then I also include like the slide deck or information that I'm going to share with the students right there in my Outlook thing. So as a part of my like workflow and protocol, when I'm about to do a Zoom like this, I told you before, I close everything out. And the last thing that I'll have open might be my Outlook calendar like this. I open it up and everything I need for that session is right there, ready to go. And those are the only windows that I have open. But I grab this information once I create that schedule. Okay. Kristen, we've run out of time a little bit. Is there anything else that we need to go over? I kind of went over this already.
No, I think you have covered what I've seen in the chat.
Okay. Something to keep in mind, student Chromebooks are different than the teacher MacBooks. When students open up Zoom and then you ask them to go into Seesaw, for example, or to open up a website, Zoom is then running in the background in a different window on their Chromebook. So on their Chromebook, their keyboard looks drastically different than our keyboard. So even having like an image like this where you can say, hey friends, can I have you click this button on your keyboard? And that should bring Zoom back up for you. Or, click open a new tab and go to Seesaw. And then when you're ready, friends, can you click that one button? I don't know what it's called. It's like a tab button. You could make up a classroom, how you might use. Click that one button, friends. But that will bring it back for them. And know too that if you're working.
Our kids have been calling it a split screen button.
There you go. Perfect. As long as you have a name for it. And then with students that are K2 with an iPad, that also will look, that your verbal instructions to them would be different. Double click the home button and then come back to me in the Zoom app. They double click the home and then it shows all the windows that are open and they would have to click which one to come back to. So using your verbal instructions or potentially, props. Don't forget, you've got this little window here, and I even went up and got my karaoke microphone. you know, when you're talking with students or singing or something, utilizing props like this, holding your microphone up like this and saying, I'm talking, now you're talking. Love it. And there's so many videos online on YouTube where people talk about utilizing props like this in Zoom rooms to engage students, especially at the elementary level, especially in our K2 level. I know this is a weird side comment and it really just only applies to like our ladies in the room, but I've watched a lot of videos for people that have taught overseas. VIP Kids, for example, is one that comes up all the time. And it's a American company where teachers teach students English in China online. And they all wear red lipstick. And at first I thought that was a weird company policy, but the basis or premise behind it is for when we're talking to students, especially our little ones, and we're talking about pronunciation and phonetics, utilizing red lipstick actually makes your mouth and your pronunciation easier for the kids to see. So it's like silly little stuff like that. Props, you know, lipstick, utilizing the webcam space as much as possible, utilizing in Zoom nonverbal participation, your reaction buttons, having them type things into chat. All of that comes into play as we talk about like what our expectations are and how we utilize like a virtual learning environment. So thinking along all those lines. As I've shared the screen here, we've kind of collated a couple of other options for you. We've got PD on the Patio series where we go through a lot more of these options. I did a session on how to use Zoom with like Google products that I think could also be really helpful. So if you're wanting to continue to like learn and up your game a little bit on how you're using Zoom in different capacities, those could be good options for you.